What if I told you that one of the most important political moments of 2026 happened on a Saturday morning, and most people scrolled right past it? What if I told you that a Democratic senator, a man who ran on progressive values, who has been a thorn in the Republican Party's side since the day he walked into the Capitol in a hoodie, just went on Fox News, looked straight into the camera, and said that Donald Trump was absolutely correct to bomb Iran? Not kind of right. Not sort of on the right track. Absolutely correct. And here's the part that should stop you dead in your tracks. He didn't say it reluctantly. He didn't hedge. He didn't whisper it. He said it loud, proud, and on national television in front of the very audience that has been calling his party weak on national security for years. And while the rest of Washington was either panicking, celebrating, or spinning, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania was doing something almost nobody in that building does anymore. He was telling you what he actually believed. If nobody in your life is explaining this to you right now, if you're watching the news and walking away more confused than when you sat down, that is exactly why this channel exists. We don't do spin here. We don't do talking points. We break down what your government is actually doing in plain English so you can form your own opinion based on facts. Not fear, not rage bait, not whatever narrative gets the most clicks. Hit subscribe right now. Not for me, for yourself, so that the next time something this big happens, you're not the last one to understand it. Welcome to Senate Decode. Let's get into it. Let's rewind to the morning of Saturday, February 28th, 2026. Most Americans woke up to headlines that looked like something out of a Tom Clancy novel. The United States and Israel had launched a coordinated military operation against Iran. The name of that operation? Operation Epic Fury. And if that name alone doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, I don't know what will. Now, before we get into the politics, let's be very clear about what this actually was. This was not a skirmish. This was not a warning shot fired into the desert. This was a joint military offensive between two of the most powerful militaries in the world, targeting Iranian military installations. And, according to reports coming out that same morning, hitting very close to the compound of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei himself. That is a significant military action. That is the kind of thing that makes diplomats sweat and generals sit up a little straighter in their chairs. And the reaction in Washington? Exactly what you'd expect. Some cheered, some condemned. Some said it was long overdue. Some said it was reckless and dangerous and could drag the United States into a war that nobody voted for. But then, in the middle of all that noise, something happened that nobody fully expected. Senator John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, walked onto Fox News of all places, and said something that made jaws drop on both sides of the aisle. Now, if you're not totally up to speed on who John Fetterman is, let me give you the 30-second version because context here is everything. John Fetterman is not your average senator. This is not a man who came from a long line of politicians. He's 6 feet, 8 inches tall. He wears hoodies and basketball shorts to Senate hearings. He had a stroke during his 2022 campaign and had to fight his way back to health while the entire country watched and debated whether he was fit to serve. He won that race anyway, and he came back. He represents Pennsylvania, a state that has become one of the most closely watched political battlegrounds in the country. And up until fairly recently, Fetterman was considered a reliable progressive vote. Healthcare, workers' rights, labor unions, the kind of Democrat that the left wing of the party considered one of their own. But over the last couple of years, Fetterman has been drifting, loudly, publicly, and without apology. He's been one of the strongest Democratic voices in support of Israel. He's pushed back on the far left of his own party on issues of immigration and border security. And now, this, backing a major military strike against Iran and calling the Republican president absolutely correct for ordering it. This is not a small thing. When a Democrat from a swing state goes on Fox News the morning of a military operation and praises the commander-in-chief who launched it, that is a political statement with enormous consequences, not just for Fetterman, for the entire Democratic Party. And here's the question that nobody on either side wants to answer honestly. Is he wrong? Let's not paraphrase. Let's not spin this. Let's talk about exactly what Fetterman said because the words matter. When Fox News host Lawrence Jones asked him why he was breaking from members of his own party who opposed the strikes, Fetterman said, and I want you to hear this clearly, you can just put out tweets and statements to support peace, but to actually create real peace, you have to do these kinds of actions. Let that land for a second. He's not saying bombs equal peace in some vague bumper sticker way. He's making a specific argument. He's saying that symbolic gestures, statements, tweets, press conferences, strongly worded letters do not change the behavior of a regime like Iran's. That real change in that region only happens through decisive, forceful action. He went on to say, point blank, I might be a Democrat, but in this specific case, the president is absolutely correct to do these kinds of actions, and now we have Israel's back. Then he added something that might be the most powerful line of the entire interview. He talked about the Iranian people, not the regime, the people. He said that Iran had massacred 30,000 of its own citizens. He said, and I'm quoting here, This war is not about the Iranian people, it's about this poisonous regime. That is a crucial distinction, and it's one that gets lost constantly in the noise around American military action abroad. When the United States strikes a government, when it targets a military installation or a regime's command structure, it is not the same as waging war on the people who live under that government. Many of those people, Fetterman noted, were reportedly laughing when they heard that strikes had hit near Khamenei's compound. Think about that. The people living inside Iran, the people who have been surveilled, imprisoned, beaten, and killed for daring to speak out against their government, and were reportedly laughing with relief. That's a detail that changes the moral calculus of this entire conversation, and Fetterman was one of the only people in Washington willing to say it out loud. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because the opposition to Operation Epic Fury was not just coming from the Democrats. Let's talk about the Gang of Eight. For those of you who don't know, the Gang of Eight is a group of 8 congressional leaders, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, who are the leaders of Congress and the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. They are supposed to be briefed on major national security operations before they happen. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed on the morning of the strikes that the Gang of Eight was given a heads up before the operation launched. But several of them weren't happy about it anyway, and among the most vocal opponents was someone you might not expect. Representative Thomas Massie, Republican, Kentucky. That's right. One of the loudest voices calling the strikes into question was a member of the president's own party. Massie has long been a vocal non-interventionist. He believes the United States has no business getting involved in foreign military conflicts, period. He doesn't want American soldiers, American money, or American weapons anywhere near a war that doesn't directly threaten American soil. That is a coherent position. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but it's consistent. But here's what makes this moment so fascinating from a political standpoint. You have a Democrat, Fetterman, breaking with the Democratic base to support a Republican president's military action, and you have a Republican, Massie, breaking with his own president to oppose that same action. The traditional left-right divide on this issue has completely collapsed, and that tells you something important about where American politics actually is right now versus where the media tells you it is. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is not left versus right. This is interventionists versus non-interventionists. It's the foreign policy establishment versus the America First crowd. And those two coalitions don't line up neatly with party labels anymore. Okay, let's zoom out, because Fetterman's comments are not just a moment. They're a signal. The Democratic Party is in the middle of an identity crisis right now. You can feel it. You can see it in the polls. You can see it in the post-election autopsies. You can see it in the fights happening in public between the centrist wing and the progressive wing of the party. And foreign policy, specifically the question of what America's role in the world should be, is at the center of that crisis. The progressive left has moved toward a broadly anti-war, anti-intervention position. They believe the United States uses its military too aggressively. They believe American foreign policy has too often been used to serve the interests of corporations and defense contractors rather than the interests of ordinary people here or abroad. That is a serious argument, and it has serious thinkers behind it. But then there's Fetterman's wing of the party, the Democrats who believe in American strength, who believe that retreating from the world stage doesn't create peace. It creates a vacuum that gets filled by actors who are far less interested in human rights, democracy, or stability. And here's the uncomfortable truth that neither side wants to fully confront. Both of them have a point. American military power has been misused. That is a historical fact. Iraq, Afghanistan. There are chapters in American foreign policy that should make every citizen uncomfortable, regardless of political affiliation. But American power has also prevented catastrophes. It has protected alliances, deterred aggressors, and yes, sometimes imperfectly, inconsistently, stood on the side of people who had no one else standing with them. The question is not whether to use American power. The question is when, how, and under what conditions. And right now, the Democratic Party does not have a clear, unified answer to that question. Fetterman's comments didn't start that division. They just put it on camera in the most visible way possible. Let's talk about Iran specifically, because there's context here that is absolutely essential to understanding why this moment matters. Iran has been at the center of Middle East tension for decades. The Islamic Republic, the regime that has been in power since the 1979 revolution, has been designated as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism by the United States government. It funds Hezbollah. It has funded Hamas. It has provided weapons and support to armed groups across the region that have killed American soldiers and destabilized governments. And it has been relentlessly pursuing nuclear capability. Now, Iran has long claimed that its nuclear program is peaceful, for civilian energy, for medical purposes. But intelligence agencies across the Western world, including American ones, have consistently assessed that Iran's ambitions extend well beyond a power plant. A nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally change the balance of power in the Middle East. and not in a direction that makes anyone in the region or in Washington sleep better at night. Fetterman referenced last year's Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Those strikes were significant, but Operation Epic Fury appears to be a different scale of operation entirely, broader, more coordinated, with the explicit involvement of the United States military. And Fetterman's argument is this: sometimes you don't get to negotiate your way to peace with a regime that has no intention of honoring an agreement. Sometimes the only path to stability runs through a demonstration of force so overwhelming that the other side has no choice but to recalibrate. He pointed to what happened in June. He said it took just 2 to 3 days for Iran to seek a ceasefire after Israel established air supremacy. And his prediction, or his hope, is that this operation will follow a similar arc. Is he right? We don't know yet. The situation is still unfolding. But his argument is not irrational. And the fact that it's coming from a Democrat, no, from a senator who represents a key swing state, tells you something about where at least some corners of the American political mainstream are landing on this question right now. Here's the part that nobody in media wants to sit with. Fetterman didn't break with his party because he suddenly became a Republican. He didn't defect. He didn't flip. He broke with his party because on this specific issue, he believed they were wrong. That is what political courage looks like, and it is rare. Think about how many politicians you can name who have held a position they actually disagreed with because the base expected it, because the donors expected it, because the talking point said, this is what your side believes, so say it. Fetterman looked at all of that, the pressure, the scrutiny, the certain backlash from the progressive left, and said, no, not this time. In this specific case, the president is right, and I'm going to say so. Now, you might agree with him. You might not. You might think the strikes were justified. You might think they were reckless and potentially destabilizing. Both of those positions have merit, and smart people are holding both of them right now. But here's what you should take away from this moment, regardless of where you land on the policy itself. This is what it looks like when an elected official actually represents their own conscience instead of their party's brand. And in 2026, that has become so unusual that when it happens, it shocks the entire political system. Let's be real about what's at stake as this situation continues to develop. First, the military situation itself. Nobody knows how long this operation will last. Fetterman himself acknowledged that on Fox News. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we just don't know the duration yet. But he drew historical parallels suggesting that Iran, faced with overwhelming military pressure, tends to seek a way out relatively quickly. If that's true, if this operation is relatively contained and Iran moves toward a ceasefire, then the political fallout is going to look very different than if this drags on for weeks or months and American forces become more deeply involved. Second, the congressional debate. The Gang of Eight was briefed, but a briefing is not the same as authorization. Several members of Congress have already signaled that they believe the president needs explicit congressional approval to continue military operations of this scale. That argument is going to get louder if this doesn't resolve quickly. Third, the political implications for Fetterman personally. He represents Pennsylvania. He will face voters eventually, and in a state that is genuinely divided, a state that has voted both ways in presidential elections in recent memory, his willingness to take this kind of stand, to break so publicly with his party, is either going to define him as a principled independent voice or cost him the support of the progressive base he needs to survive a primary. That is a genuine political risk, and he took it anyway. So here's where we land. A Democratic senator from a swing state went on Fox News the morning of one of the most significant U.S. military operations in years and said the Republican president was absolutely correct. Not because he had to, not because his party told him to, because he looked at the situation and made a judgment call that he was willing to put his name on publicly. And the reaction from Washington, from the media, from both parties, was the same kind of stunned silence that always follows when someone in that building decides to just tell you what they actually think. That silence is telling, because what they don't want you to notice is that the lines you've been told separate the two parties, the clear, clean lines they draw in every election cycle to make you feel like you have to pick a side and stay there, those lines are blurring, not on every issue, but on the fundamental questions about strength, about security, about what it means to protect the people you were elected to serve. Politicians on both sides are landing in places their parties weren't expecting them to land. That's the real story here, not just a senator who agreed with the other party, a political system cracking open at the seams, and we will be here every single week to tell you what's actually happening inside those cracks. If you found value in this breakdown, do something with it. Share this video with someone who's trying to make sense of what they're seeing in the news. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you land on the Iran strikes, on Fetterman's move, on what you think this means for the Democratic Party going forward. I read every comment. I want to know what you think. And if you're not subscribed yet, I mean it, now is the time. Hit that button. Join this community, because the news cycle is moving faster than ever, and you deserve to understand it. This is Senate Decode. I'll see you in the next one.